Consideration of a 2-year extension of use permit 12-01, requesting authorization to establish a large volume transfer station. Dave Cunin, on behalf of Recycling Industries Incorporated, is requesting authorization to extend previously approved use permit UP-12-01 for an additional 2 years. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Arnaldo Rodriguez for a staff report.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Arnaldo Rodriguez, Development Services Director. The item before you this evening is a use permit. More specifically, it's a request to extend the life of a use permit by additional 2 years. This project and associated use permits for the subject property, there are a total of 3 associated use permits, which I'll get into the specifics on all 3 of them, and then also this is the second request for an extension, the previous one being in 2016, and I'll be outlining that as well. Just for the sake of background purposes and just for the knowledge of both the Planning Commission and the community members this evening, Recycling Industries has obviously submitted a request to extend the life of use permits. Use permits become null and void if an applicant does not effectuate that use permit. In this particular case, the use permit would become null and void next month, more specifically July the 23rd of 2018. If the Planning Commission this evening were to grant the extension, the use permit would obviously become active, or the lifespan would carry forward until July 23rd of 2020. So just in terms of big picture, the subject site is located within the southeast quadrant of the city. It's just west of the river, north-south thoroughfare. It's on a relatively, it's on a local road, more specifically Epling, and then Lincoln Road is the prominent east-west street to the west. The nearest home to the facility is roughly 1,900 linear feet as the crow flies, and again, that's simply measuring it from the property line. I went straight across, and there's a mobile home park there, Gumtree Mobile Home Park, and then there's a handful of single-family homes, or actually not a handful, but there's a single-family home neighborhood immediately to the south of that. So roughly 1,900 feet, slightly a little bit north. This is a zoomed-in aerial photo. It shows the site. The site is currently developed with 5, I call them nondescript metal buildings on the property as part of this use permit. The applicant, going back to 2012 when he initially applied for the use permit, had identified that the 2 western buildings would be demolished. They would be replaced with a larger 25,000 square foot building, and I have a site plan in a couple of slides that identifies that. Again, 2 local roads access the site. The primary or the principal access is off of Epling. However, the applicant also has access off of Putnam Drive. As you can tell from the aerial photo, there are a handful of industrial sites in the immediate vicinity. There are 2 vacant parcels. There's one immediately to the north, and there's one which is just off of the parcel here, immediately to the east, and then there's also the one to the south, which the applicant currently owns. Worth noting is that Yuba City Steel was to the northwest. The building's there, but unfortunately Yuba City Steel is no longer a tenant. There's a new property owner to that building, and he's a local owner. So in terms of background, in terms of the site history, again, there are a total of 3 use permits, but the one that's being considered this evening, not to muddy the waters, is use permit 1201. However, prior to the filing of 1201, the applicant applied for it and was granted by the Planning Commission use permit 712, and the 7 corresponds to the year 2007. So the site has been actively used as a recycling center for approximately 11 years. Again, 5 buildings that currently operates as a recycling facility, and the business is currently operating under the auspices of this use permit. So the extension does not impact their existing operations, because again, they're obviously operating under use permit. That's approximately 11 years. So To fast forward to 2012, the applicant approached the city requesting a new use permit. That use permit was subsequently forwarded to the Planning Commission for consideration. It was approved on July the 23rd of 2014. At the time, city staff prepared a mitigated negative declaration, and that's just a fancy term for an environmental assessment pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. At the time, both the applicant and staff made a determination that there was going to be approximately 238 vehicle trips a day. There would not be more than 50 PM peak trips. So as part of the environmental assessment, a traffic impact study was not prepared. However, it was not prepared because at the time it was not deemed warranted. And the applicant also had received multiple letters of support from neighboring properties. I should also add that one of those was Yuba City Steel, which I stated a little while ago. The building's there, but the business is no longer there. Those letters of support were attached to the Planning Commission report as they were presented back in 2014 to the Planning Commission. So the use permit itself is a request to establish a large volume transfer station. Again, they would demolish the two western buildings that would be replaced by a larger 25,000 square foot building. One of the keys of the permit would be to allow the applicant to receive up to 100 tons of mixed, recyclable, and solid materials per day. They would also be allowed to accept up to 10% putrescibles, and that's up to 10% of the total material received, with the cap obviously being 100 tons a day. The term putrescible, just for the benefit of everyone, because I'll confess I had to look it up myself, means that it's liable to become putrid and it decays/rots. The facility itself, it would be a self-haul only facility. A packer garbage truck would not be permitted. And then on top of that, at the time the Planning Commission reviewed and approved the application, there was a condition added, which is not a common condition, that states that for the first 3 years once they're in operation, the Planning Commission would review it on an annual basis. As the Planning Commission is aware, since I've been here next month will be 3 years, and I do not recall us placing a condition similar to that on any project. We discussed it on the previous project, but again, that is not very common for projects to come back to the Planning Commission once they're in operation. Just for the benefit of everyone, that's an example of a garbage packer truck. Obviously, there's a lot of different models. This is just a stock photo that I found online, but that's just to simply describe what a packer truck. So this type of truck would not be permitted under the extension request. So it's not permitted today in terms of how they operate, going back to the 2007 use permit, and as part of the 2012 use permit, it would not be permitted either. So the site itself, I mentioned a few minutes ago that there's currently 5 buildings. The western 2 buildings would be demolished as part of this, and this is a site plan that was submitted and approved by the Planning Commission going back to 2014. So the red simply identifies the 5 buildings, and then I've identified in blue there, that would be the new building. So obviously, in order to facilitate the construction of the larger building, the new building, the 2 smaller buildings again would have to be demolished. So just in terms of timelines, because I knew I threw a couple of some dates out. So the permit itself, the original permit, the 2012 permit, which is before the commission this evening, was originally approved by the commission on July the 23rd, 2014, expiration date exactly 2 years later. Back in 2016, on July the 7th, the applicant submitted a request to extend it for an additional 2 years, because again, the use permits do become null and void after 2 years if it's not effectuated. Shortly thereafter, we presented that extension request to the Planning Commission on August the 24th with a new expiration date of July the 23rd. And this would be the second extension request, and obviously it says TBD because that would be predicated on the Commission's action this evening. And again, the table simply reflects the date that the items were submitted or approved, not the date, I apologize. It reflects the action date, not the day the items were submitted to the city. So in terms of the extension that's before the commission this evening, again, and I know I probably sound like a broken record here, because it has not, the use permit itself has not been effectuated, it would become null and void. The Yuba City Municipal Code outlines two conditions that have to be met in order for a use permit to be extended. There does have to be a timely request for the extension by an applicant. And two, the review authority must determine that the conditions have not changed to the extent that would warrant denial of the extension. So condition number one is a timely request. And the answer, extremely short, yes, the applicant submitted a timely request. Condition number two, going back to the review authority must determine that conditions have not changed. Just briefly, from staff's perspective, the site is planned and zoned for it's zoned heavy industrial, it's zoned for manufacturing, processing, warehousing, and neither of which have changed since the original approval going back to 2014. From staff's review, and the surrounding area was and remains industrial in nature. Obviously, there's been a couple of new tenants here and there, but again, those are relatively minor. A couple of those did come before the Planning Commission in the past 2 years. And overall, the area has experienced nominal change in terms of new uses, either new developments or new planned developments in the area. For the most part, in the past 4 years, there has not been grandiose changes to that area, either by applicants, by property owners, or by the city. And if you simply take a look at an aerial photo, if one were to study the 2014 aerial photo, it largely resembles this. The only new building in the area would be this one, and that building happened to be constructed at the time that the 2014 building was approved. So the permit itself was, this specific permit, the use permit was approved in July. That building, they were granted their certificate of occupancy in September of 2014. However, it had been under construction during that same period. And for the most part, there had not been grandiose changes. With that being said, the Planning Commission and the City Council in January of 2016 did approve a 168-unit apartment complex on the south side of Lincoln. But again, as the crow flies, that's probably in excess of about 2,100 feet or so. And the access itself, one would access Lincoln, whereas the principal traffic to the subject site would be Garden Highway. From our opinion, again, and not a lot of changes. So, worth noting, I'm going to briefly talk about the third use permit. And the primary reason for that is because I know there's been a lot of discussion in the community. There was an article about it in today's local newspaper. So the applicant has filed a brand new use permit. And that use permit would be an amendment to the use permit being discussed this evening, which is 1201. So the new use permit number is 1705. So just very quickly, the proposal, which again is not before the commission this evening, is to increase or to expand the facility from 3 to 4 acres, to increase the amount of material that can be accepted from 100 tons a day to up to 300 tons a day, to remove any conditions in terms of the amount of putrescible material that can be accepted, and to remove any limitations on the deliveries. So in other words, in theory, the applicant would have the ability to accept garbage packer trucks. So what's the status of this application? A couple of months ago, city staff delivered a letter to the applicant where we informed them that prior to the city considering the application, as part of it, the applicant would have to retain a qualified environmental consulting firm to prepare an initial study pursuant to CEQA. Once they submit that, the city is going to retain its own environmental consulting firm to peer review the document. The expenses of that would be borne by the applicant. Once we complete our review, we would begin to review the merits of the project pursuant to the municipal code. Once the project would be ready, in terms of presenting the project or moving the project forward, at that time we would schedule a public hearing, we would notify the community, and that application would come before the Planning Commission for consideration. I cannot tell you the precise date of that, because obviously the applicant has commissioned the initial study, and I understand that the applicant is working towards that. And so once we receive that, we will take a look at it, and again, we will have our own independent environmental consulting firm peer reviewed the document. So again, so this evening tonight, it's a consideration of the use permit 12-01, and it would be an extension of the life of the use permit for an additional 2 years. So just in summary, again, it calls for the removal of the 2 buildings, the construction of a new building in their place of 25,000 square feet to allow the acceptance of up to 100 tons of trash per day, or so not trash, so recyclables and solid waste. The applicant would have the ability to accept up to 10% putrescibles of all materials accepted, and it would also place a limitation in terms of who delivers it, with a prohibition of packer garbage trucks. They would not be permitted. And again, the applicant would have to come before the planning commission once they're in operation for 3 consecutive years to ensure that they were in compliance with the conditions as outlined in the staff report. So staff's recommendation this evening is to grant the use permit extension for an additional 2 years with the new expiration of July 23rd, 2020. The only condition that staff is recommending that the commission this evening consider is the added condition that the applicant agrees to defend, identify, and hold harmless the city. The primary reason for that is, as the planning commission knows, that almost every project that's come before the planning commission, I'm going to say probably in the past 24 months, has that language in it. So at the time, the condition was not included. However, every project, I believe every project, probably in the past 24 months, staff has included that condition. So with that being said, that concludes my presentation, and staff's available to answer the questions.
Okay, so back to the commission. We'll start with you, Commissioner Sandbrook. Did you have questions about?
Yes, I just have a couple. Arnaldo, as I review the staff report, the initial extension was approved on August 24th, 2016. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right. And that was for 2 years.
Correct.
So arguably, the permit would not expire until August 24th, 2018. Am I correct? At least arguably.
Correct.
All right. Now, when we consider an application for an extension of a land use entitlement, which we're doing, no public hearing is required to consider that. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right. Okay. Now, I was on the commission in 2014 when this entitlement was approved. And one of the conditions that was stated at that time was that the permit, which is 12-01, would be null and void without further action if utilization, and I emphasize the word utilization, of the permit has not been substantially commenced. Now, my understanding is that there may very well have been utilization of this permit. And I want to just go through the shopping list with you to see if we're on the same wavelength. They were required to prepare what's called a facility processing report, which fully described the design and the operations of the large volume transfer station. They were required to do an on-site traffic management plan, and that was to be a part of that facility processing report. They were also required to prepare what's called a records and reporting plan, and that was also included, as I remember, in the facility processing report. They were required to secure the necessary state approval of the LVTS. And I understand that was secured either in late 2015 or early 2016. They were also required to apply to the Regional Waste Management Authority to add what's called a non-disposable solid waste facility. And I understand they did that. And that was approved. They were also required to submit to the County of Yuba Environmental Health Division an application for a solid waste facility permit, which they did, and that was approved. Okay, now, obviously that took a substantial effort, both in terms of time and money. And I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. And it seems to me an argument can be advanced that that was a utilization substantially of that permit. Okay? Do you see where I'm coming from?
I do.
Okay. What's your take on that?
On some of the items in terms of submitting to the local enforcement agency, which for the Yuba Center area is Yuba County, I'll have to defer to the applicant on that. On some of the other items, in anticipation of this item coming up, I added a slide here, and the Yuba City Municipal Code specifically states, in terms of commencement of construction, in terms of effectuating a land use entitlement, when there is new construction. In this case, there happens to be new construction because there's a request to construct a 25,000 square foot building, replacing the two smaller buildings that are there today. And this is, this is a quote, adding the municipal code, the underlying was added simply for emphasis purposes. So within 2 years of the date of its approval, or in the case of appeals, the date the approval was affirmed or in denial was reversed. For the purposes of this article, commencement of construction means the installation of building foundations. Prior to this, or just above this section, which unfortunately I did not put on the overhead, there's a discussion of substantially commenced. And so this section of the code, my interpretation would be that in terms of substantially commencing would be that the applicant would have to construct the building foundations to effectuate the permit. There's additional language. Once they do that, how much time do they have to complete the building? And if I recall, I believe it's 2 years, but again, it's in on the floor, but I can take a look at that. And on some of the other items, Commissioner Sandbrook, like I said, I probably would have to defer to the applicant in terms of the approvals at the state or in terms of regional.
But Arnaldo, they were also required to remove buildings, was it 2 and 3 as reflected on the site plan too, right?
Correct.
In addition to constructing this new 25,000 square foot building.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Blake, did you have questions of?
Yeah. Through the chair. To piggyback on Commissioner Sandbrook, and perhaps this isn't a question for the applicant, what inhibited the commencement of the construction in the last 2 years?
I'll have to defer to the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Euler?
Okay. I've got a couple of questions. You talk about in the staff report the expansion, and normally I wouldn't look too much at the expansion in terms of approving an extension of an existing use permit, but we did bring it up. And so my question is, without this extension, how would that affect the expansion? And is that something that we should be taking into our thought process with respect to the extension?
I think in terms of the strict application of the Yuba City Municipal Code, the item before the commission this evening is, did the applicant comply with the 2 conditions outlined? One was their timely filing for an extension request, and the second one, have the conditions changed that would warrant, I believe it's worded, the denial of the request. And I will pull it up just so the review authority must determine that the conditions have not changed to the extent that would warrant denial of the extension. I do not believe it would be appropriate to take into consideration a project that's not before the commission this evening. The only reason that the language was added in the staff report, which again, that I wouldn't consider that a common practice, but it's also not extremely common to have an active use permit, an extension of a use permit, and potentially a new use permit. The reason that was added again was because there's been a lot of discussion in the community about the various use permits, and I was attempting to avoid any potential confusion. But again, I do not believe it would be appropriate this evening to take the use permit, which is not before the planning commission this evening, to take that into account in terms of the extension for use permit that was granted to the applicant back in 2014. The applicant, in theory, and I haven't spoken to them, but hypothetically, he could withdraw the application for the expanded use permit tomorrow. And that, I think, would be unfair for the planning commission to take that into account, because at this point, he's in the infancy stages in terms of that project. In terms of the processing of it goes, from his perspective, he's probably been working on it for a while, but in terms of the processing it from the city perspective, it's pretty early in the process.
Okay. And I guess I should disclose also that I've met with the applicant and toured their site, and also I met with a couple of folks that are opposed to the extension, Rick Jimerson and David Shaw, and talked to them a little bit about their reasons for that. And so I did want to disclose that, but also I just want to come back real quick to the expansion. It sounds to me like realistically we should not be using any of the thought process with respect to the expansion in terms of our determination with the extension that we're voting on tonight.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay.
I would agree with that 100%, Commissioner Riley.
Okay, I did have a couple other questions about, you mentioned that the traffic study was not done when this was done originally, and that the only exception to the types of vehicles were the packer trucks, the garbage packer trucks. Were there any other types of vehicles that were not, that should not be included or were exempted from that?
Back in 2014, when the mitigated negative declaration was prepared, a traditional traffic impact study in the truest form was not prepared. And the reason I want to clarify that is traffic was assessed. However, based on the numbers at the time, the numbers that would be generated by the site, the number of vehicle trips per day did not exceed the minimum thresholds to require a full traffic study in terms of how it's defined by CEQA. So at the time when they studied them, the traffic was taken into consideration, and at the time the only vehicles that were excluded, to my understanding, were the garbage packer trucks.
Okay. And basically we've determined there's been really realistically no measurable new development in that area that would cause us to believe that there's been an increase, a substantial increase in traffic since 2014. Most of the development was already there. Even further beyond the immediate area, I think back to the Tower Mart was probably already there. The subdivisions immediately to the south of the Tower Mart were already there, creating traffic in the general area, I think, going up through there. So realistically, the traffic has pretty much stayed the same, if I'm not mistaken. Is that, and
Yeah.
that seems to be your assessment?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then another question was, with respect to the CEQA, you said that one was not done in 2014, correct?
No, a mitigated negative declaration was prepared. One was prepared in 2007 when the recycling center first went in. There was a second one completed in 2014 for the application that's before you this evening. And there's a new environmental assessment that's in the process of being prepared for the new application, which is not before the commission this evening.
Okay, so they did do an environmental assessment in 2014. Okay.
And they did.
All right.
And then also, as part of that, They had also filed there's a notice of completion that was filed at State Clearinghouse, and they also filed a notice of determination, which was filed with Sutter County. I do not recall if it was filed at the state office. I'd have to do a little research on that.
Okay. And I don't mean to belabor the expansion, but I know, you said we need to set this aside, or we should be, if we're prudent to do so. But one of the questions that I had was, you indicated that you can't for sure say the exact date of when the expansion might come before the commission, but do you have even an approximation of when that might come before the commission? And where I'm going with that is, if it's a near enough time, why not just push the two together and have them all done at the same time?
I'll have to defer to the applicant in terms of when he's planning on submitting the initial study to the city. I think it would be premature on my part to speculate when we may receive that. And once we receive it, we would have to review it. We're going to have it peer reviewed to make sure that it complies with CEQA, and at that point, can we move the project forward.
Okay, that concludes my questions.
All right, Commissioner Shannon, did you have questions?
I do. In 2014, the members of the board at the time learned more about trash than most people learn in a lifetime. We learned about the laws, the agencies that control, had a tour not only of the facility here in Yuba City, but several different facilities in the Sacramento area. And from that research and homework, we felt very comfortable in approving the initial use permit that is before us. We are here to evaluate an extension of that permit and not any changes to that at this time. I think it would be premature to try to squeeze anything together because there's still a lot of outstanding paperwork that will need to be done, at least from what I understand when you go through the application process, which we did last time, trying to hurry it up before this use permit actually expires. It might not be possible just because of deadlines. It's not really appropriate for us to discuss an expansion because that's not what is before us tonight. It is just very simply to grant an extension to an existing approval. So I want to make sure that everybody's clear that what's before us is something that's been before us, that's been approved since 2014 and has actually had extensions. And there was a lot of homework done then and a lot of homework done now. So any further expansion will be evaluated separately, and decisions will be based on the merits of that application. So I guess those aren't really questions, those are comments, but I'm kind of concerned because it's sort of confusing that we have two issues, and we really only have one issue, and that is the approval of the extension of the use permit. So
I concur with your comments, Commissioner Shannon, 100%.
So, Commissioner Schaefer, did you have questions or comments?
Yeah, just real quick, not the Monday morning quarterback, but I think it would have been better had you not included that other language about the expansion, because it confused the daylights out of me as well. When I read the material, I thought we were focused on one issue here tonight, and it kind of bled into a second that obviously confused a lot of people, so probably that would have been better not to have included. My question, I guess, to you, and I'm sure you can answer it if I need to ask the applicant, but have you received any negative feedback from some of these adjoining landowners since 2014 from the operations that they've been doing to date?
Since I've been at the city, which was July 2015, I do not recall any complaints from neighboring property owners. I did receive, I believe, 2 requests from neighboring property owners who requested that we advise them of any public hearings, any staff reports, or anything like that. They were notified. I emailed them this document probably an hour or so after the planning commission received it. To my knowledge, again, I don't recall, since I've been here, receiving any complaints about the facility.
So the folks that wrote the letters in the original application that were in support of this particular company have not reiterated a difference of opinion at this point to you?
No.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I've got right now. I've got some for the applicant when they stand up.
Just one more comment, if I could, one more question. Arnaldo, you put up the 2 specific criteria that would guide this commission in exercising its discretion as to whether or not to grant the extension of the permit, correct?
Correct.
And clearly from your staff report, those conditions have been clearly met.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so Arnaldo, thank you for a very well prepared staff report. I appreciate the comments of all of the commissioners. I agree that our focus this evening is on what is in front of us. And also I realize that we do not have a requirement to open it to public comment, but based on the level of concern in the community, I believe that we will go into that aspect of it. I was also involved in 2014 and concur with Commissioner Shannon. Commissioner Sandbrook was also on the commission at that time. And we spent some time, extensive time and days touring and evaluating and looking at this. We're community members too, and we want what's best for the community. So we took this very seriously in our initial decision-making process, and I believe that they would both concur with that. That being said, we have a new group of commissioners here who are not perhaps as familiar. I actually appreciated the proposal to amend information in here so that I would have that in the back of my mind, although I don't believe it's pertinent this evening. Also, to not confuse things further, I concur with Commissioner Shannon that our focus is, one, to listen to the public because they are here to share with us, but then to stay clear on what our goals are this evening and what our guidelines are for the commission. With that, did you have any further comment? Okay. I will open up the public comment portion and would like to invite anyone who would like to speak in favor to approach the podium, and please state your name and address. And we do have written requests which we will honor also this evening. So is anybody who would like to speak in favor of the project? You certainly come to the podium and state your name and address.
Did you want me to answer questions later?
Certainly.
I'll just have a quick comment, then I can answer questions later. Is that okay? Or?
Yes, the commissioners will ask you questions while you're up there.
Good evening, Planning Commission members. Again, lovely to see you all, and appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. We're a homegrown company. We started here in Yuba City 40 years ago. My father put together this, he's here, this program together from a church charity program that they wanted to not use anymore, and that's how we started. We started in our backyard collecting paper and making bales, little hay bales of paper, and God willing, we're still here. And 80 employees later, we'd like to keep going that way. The extension is very much needed, and we need that extension for, because there's been a lot of environmental work done on our existing permit, and that environmental work is a baseline for future studies that'll come before you. And so our position is that we need this to continue, and our goal is to, we're very close. We want to have this expansion issue, and I know you don't want to mix them, but the expansion issue is going to come in the coming months, not years, it's months. So that's why we need this extension. At the same time, I don't know if this is the appropriate time though for me to answer questions, or should I want to hear, I don't know if there's going to be other comments, and maybe come back after to answer questions. I'm asking you, Commissioner Ali.
Dave, I believe that the commissioners at this time have some questions that they would like to have responded to.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, if there's questions now, and then I can wrap up.
Yeah, Dave, I've got a couple of questions. Are you prepared to move forward on this entitlement at this time?
On the current permit?
Yes.
We're prepared to move forward. However, the expansion has presented a better environmental standpoint in that we've got this 4th acre that's extended our facility and made it easier to maneuver and do things.
And tell me, what has delayed breaking ground, if I can use that
Sure.
term? Is it a question of economics or what?
Well, there's two things. When the Planning Commission approved us in 2014, there's still a lengthy process we have to go through, as outlined by you, Commissioner Sandbrook.
Yes.
And that process took several months. It was into 2015 before we got that finalized, and then to get a building built and constructed just was not economically feasible before the deadline. And we just weren't able to put it all together economically to get a building done. That's why we came for the extension the first time. Our intent was to have everything completed, and as part of the extension, the 4th acre became available. We wanted to expand to the 4th acre, and we were informed we have to come back to the Planning Commission for an extension to expand to the 4th acre.
But was there a problem in securing financing at that critical time?
At the 2016 time, yes.
Yes, okay, that's
It
what
was
I
very critical. We just couldn't put it together.
Yeah.
So we're in a position now. Everything's ready, going, funded. I mean, the only thing holding us up from breaking shovel-ready stuff is approval process.
Okay. And as far as removing those 2 buildings, I would assume that requires a demolition permit, but that can be done overnight.
Yeah, you can. The demo permit can be done. It's getting they still have to get a building permit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's all I've got at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Blake, you had a question.
That was my question. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Euler, did you have any for the applicant?
So just the question that I had before, Dave, with respect, and I'm also taking into account Arnaldo's suggestion that we not look at the expansion, but since it is in the notes to the staff analysis, you know, I am giving it a little bit of look, if you will. And the question is, I'm not sure, but why not just push them together and do both at the same time in terms of the expansion and the extension?
If we will not have the document ready before the existing permit expires. If the existing permit expires, you will, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that we would forfeit. And
so you would have to start that.
We would literally have to start completely over. And it's just, I'm just going to say it just doesn't seem fair. I mean, we're ready. We have to get this in order to come back to you for this expansion. And I'm asking for a 2-year extension. You're not going to need it. I mean, we're going to be back to you in a few months. Unfortunately, we won't be back to you before our existing permit expires. And if it does expire, the expansion, that's off the table, which is probably why everybody's trying to rally against it. I don't know. But I know for me, this is a tremendous win for the residents. This will be a win for the city. It keeps us sustainable. It provides good local, meaningful jobs. And, you know, it's time that we have a site in the city. And it's so far off the beaten path. We're almost 2,000 feet, 1,900 feet away from the nearest resident. But we are ready. And I'm just asking for your extension on this. Any other?
Commissioner Shannon, did you have any questions? Okay,
No.
okay.
I have one more question.
Could we let Commissioner Schaefer
Sure.
have his opportunity? Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question for you, a little bit about your business. How much tonnage are you doing a day now? I know you can do up to 100 tons a day.
We can do up to 100.
And what are you doing per day right now?
Right now, we're on like 25.
Okay, so you have to hit 4 times your current activity just to breach the current permit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you expect to hit that 100-ton limit anytime soon? I mean, what do you think the source of that tonnage is going to be?
Without
Is there that much more garbage in Yuba City that needs to get processed through your plant?
We've done the analytics based on the available data for the region, and we see that we won't get close to the 100 tons a day, but we'll get up there. I mean,
Okay.
that's what makes our facility sustainable. It's very difficult with the little amount of available tons in the region, purely just from pure recycling.
Right.
It makes it difficult to sustain the business, and that's why we're trying to, frankly, make our business more sustainable, but also provide a great service to the community.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, have you or your company received negative feedback from residents 2,000 feet away, or any of the adjoining property owners? Have they shown up on your doorstep and said, hey, we have an issue with your operations here?
Never had a complaint ever in the 9 years we've been operating.
Huh, that's good feedback. Thank you.
Never.
Yeah, I'm done.
Just one more question, Dave. I outlined a shopping list of all the hoops you had to jump through and all of the approvals that were needed in support of my position that you've utilized the permit. Can you give us an idea as to how much money you've had to lay out to accomplish all that?
We're already 150,000 into it. Over 100,000. It's expensive. I mean, you can ask anyone in the industry. It is not cheap to do what we're doing, and unfortunately, I don't want to forfeit those dollars.
Thank you.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I do have a question, Dave. Perhaps you could assist me with this one, only because with the permit that's before us today, we understand that no Packer trucks are permitted, and in the original, permit 12-01, you have in your facility processing report, in which was dated a revision of December 2013, and maybe this will help, Dale with Commissioner Eiler with the questions about traffic and congestion and whatnot. You have in there your types and numbers of vehicles and your daily vehicle counts. Would you say that is still accurate information?
What page are you on?
In your facility processing report is page 8-9, which was the original submission.
It's page what?
8 and 9
Oh, page 8 and 9.
of your facility
Yeah.
processing.
You're looking at table 1, the daily vehicle
Correct.
counts.
Yeah. Would that be around correct to this?
Yeah, so the permitted traffic we were asking for at the time was 238 trips. We're way below that now. We're not even close to the 238.
Thank you.
So.
All right, David, this time I don't have any other questions, but I did want to state, because I believe I failed to when I opened the public comment, that I have spoken with both sides of this issue also. We're going to take a 5-minute recess and reopen the public hearing. So I'll close the public hearing and reopen at
This is
7
no
o'clock.
public hearing. There's no public hearing
Excuse
required,
me.
Madam Chair.
I know that there is no public hearing required, but we have, public comment is being received this evening and we have had written requests. To do a 5-minute recess and then we'll start again. Thank you.
Excuse me, gentlemen, just a quick FYI, whatever you want to talk about, it's not a hot mic, I've already turned it off.
Oh, okay, sweet.
It's not a hot mic, man, I won't do a hot mic on you.
Hey, you too. Hanging in there. I know. I'll put a bonus. Let's see. Nothing. It's a good thing. Yeah, no, I got, none of it well, one was in Fremont at a JC. So now they're both doing Johnson. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
He actually, I met him. I was on the legislature for college when he was kind of leading that committee. I remember someone telling me that he was up there. But I don't remember where I was. But he was saying, your kids up there. Big volleyball player.
Yeah, no kidding.
Even back in the day when it was volleyball, that college has always had pretty vibrant sports program. Because they can actually outside of their athletes. Don't go away. Their basketball. Don't go home yet. This is pretty. Have you been up there? It's pretty exciting. Oh yeah. There's Regal, sports, really like one of my all-time favorite sports out there is White, which is in class, which is just a little bit south. Tacoma, it's up there, yeah. There's one up there called the You know who has a place?
How are you?
70. Yeah. If it's really bad, I'll take 89. If it's really bad, I don't know how much that. It's about 4 times Yeah, that's where they go for it. You got Chico Arena. What's nice about that college is and they really integrate it. So if somebody elderly person needs help moving, they grab the sports guy.
Let's resume the meeting. I'm calling it back to order.
Pretty good myself. Okay.
That was quite a buzz. Okay, with that, I'm going to open up the public comment session again. And is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the project?
How about it's the neutral? Just a question.
Certainly. Please state your name and address.
Mark Boomgarden, 1520 Pintail Court in Yuba City, and this is probably more of a question for Arnaldo. I was confused by admittedly by the presentation. Is this an extension of an existing permit, or are we modifying that permit with what's happening tonight?
Please, Honorable.
This would be an extension of a use permit that was granted back in 2014. The only condition that staff is recommending that we amend was the added language regarding the
indemnity.
Sorry.
It looked like there was a slide up there that said that they were going to take, and you're going to have to help me with the word putrescible, which was that part of the existing permit?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because what red language is sitting there having some stuff.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the project?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I would like
Could you please come to the podium?
but only after everyone else has spoken. Can I do that?
Well, right now, if you'd like to speak in favor, it's open for that.
Oh. Thank you very much, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Scott Cunin. I'm president and owner of Recycling Industries. I reside in Yuba City at 1754 Columbia Drive, and I'm grateful to be here and grateful for the opportunity to speak. I just have one page that'll be short. I think we have to remember that in the promotion of every great thing, there are always those who are opposed, always. The approval of this transfer station will be one more movement in the right direction to provide greater and better services for the citizens of Yuba City and Sutter County. Because the city put their waste hauling contract out to bid, the ratepayers of Yuba City are now saving over $1 million a year. The transfer station will now provide further economic benefits to the city, its residents, and its businesses. Citizens of Yuba City and Sutter County will now be able to offload their self-hauled trash without having to drive 15 miles over to Marysville and back, actually to Hallwood almost. Approval of this extension and transfer station will be a win-win-win situation. Why three? Because the city wins with the greater value to its general fund. The citizens win because they will have a state-of-the-art transfer station to unload their self-haul trash far closer to their homes. And Recycling Industries will win because this transfer station will create a more sustainable operation for our company. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, are there any others who would like to speak in favor of the project? Please approach the podium.
Thank you. I'm Randy Page. I live at 1871 Malkeith Court, which is in North Yuba City. I lived in South Yuba City for most of my life. And I'm when it comes to jobs and our local businesses, I think we should support them whenever we have the opportunity. And this issue to me is a simple extension of a current agreement with some added language. Now, I don't know about the expansion language, but we'll cross that hurdle when we get to it. But thank you for your time, and I hope you say yes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the project? Seeing none, I do have some written requests to speak, and if you would like to approach the podium at this time. Yes. And then please state your name and address.
Dave Shaw, and I live at 2148 Broad Court, Yuba City. Madam Chair and Commission members, again, my name is Dave Shaw, and I'm a business owner and resident of Yuba City. And I stand before you tonight, either to ask for you to deny or approve this use permit in question. I come before you tonight with questions that I feel need to be answered in your consideration of the permit tonight. But first, I want to clarify how we got to this position tonight of such a heated debate in this community. People have asked, why do I, Dave Shaw, care about a transfer station and a recycling center in South Yuba City when I live and own a business in North? I have heard that this is a political stunt. I've even heard that I work for Ecology, and neither of these two are correct. While we all know that Mr. Cunin has been seeking a transfer station for many years now, the process is still in the works, and we currently do not have a commercial facility inside the corporate city limits of Yuba City. By commercial, I mean a commercial garbage or the packer truck, as you talked about, delivering to the facility on Apley Drive. The point in time that this became an issue to me was when Councilman Buckland stated on November 21st, 2017 council meeting that, quote, I would personally like to see a transfer station in the corporate city limits. Then a short time later, at that same meeting, Mr. Cunin stated that he would be up and running by January 1, 2019 with a transfer facility. It was at that very point in time that the issue became one that I started monitoring. It was at that very meeting that I myself was spoken to inappropriately by our then Mayor Cleveland in a manner who seemed to present itself as the residents of Yuba City didn't have a voice in anything. What had happened to our democratic process, and was this project being moved through without any public notice or input? I have recently received a letter from Mr. Cunin that suggests I'm the mastermind behind Stop the Dump. Again, that is incorrect. I was made aware of this petition, and I signed it after about 300 people had already signed it. And I just simply believe in the democratic process and felt that the people need to have a voice. So I spoke up, and I've had meetings with the city, as the city is the conduit for this process. From the beginning, this has been about transparency and the process so that our elected officials and yourselves can make a well-informed decision about the future of Yuba City. I do not find fault with Mr. Cunin, Dave, no fault with you at all, sir, as he is trying to grow his business. There's been a lot of misinformation by the city during this process. Thus, we ended up here tonight as a result of certain actions by members of our city council and the rightful entrepreneurship of a local business simply trying to grow. I care deeply about this city, and I have chosen to raise my family here and be a part of. Now I'll get to my questions. In the letter from Mr. Cunin that I received on Friday via email, he states that without this permit extension, he cannot operate and will have to close down and lay off about 80 employees. According to the city earlier, he's not operating under this permit and will have no effect on the current operations. I just said, which is correct? Who's correct here? This is a question that you, the commission, need to find out the answer, as we cannot play with the livelihood of recycling industry's employees as members of our council did with the employees of Ecology during the past year. Any way you look at it, an employer, a city, nor concerned citizens should make an employee feel that their job is on the line. This leads to my next question. What is the need for the use permit? If you discover that it's not being used, which there's been some speculation on tonight, and this is for you to decide, then the question is, why is it being extended? It is my understanding after discussion with the city that this permit could be used for the expansion. If so, please keep in mind that per the July 23rd, 14 Planning Commission reports, no traffic report was done or an environmental impact report was done, and commercial trucks were prohibited. My question again is simply, should this go forward, will these studies have to be done in order to execute this permit? I nor anyone else I know has issues with the current operations of recycling industries, and we are glad to have them as part of our community. I commend Mr. Cunin for wanting to expand and provide a service to the residents of Yuba City. This is a free market, but we all have rules to operate by. Therefore, in short, you have a decision to make tonight, and I've done my part to ask some of the questions that over 900 other people want to ask. 1, does RI need this permit to maintain its current operations? If so, don't play games with the 80 employees. Number 2, what are the long-term plans by RI for this use permit? And number 3, will extending this permit preclude the proper studies from being done on the new proposed expansion? And is it fair to the public that has not had a chance to have their voice heard?
Okay, so if you'll please wrap it up.
I'm right there at the end. Thank you, Madam Chair. As a city and a community, we are much better than the actions I've seen over this past year. I encourage you each to raise the task before you, as I know you will, and make the best decision based upon all the information you have, weigh it out, and do what's in best interest of the residents of Yuba City. This is in your hands, and many of the tensions around us could have been avoided had we had constant and consistent information from the city. You're the ones that have to make the decision, and I yield myself completely to your decision. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I wish for the best possible outcome for Mr. Cunin, the city of Yuba City, and the residents that call this home. Thank you.
Thank you, David. At this time, if I will hold back any responses to that, but was there anyone else that would like to speak against the project?
I called in yesterday and was told that my 24-hour notice was given and I would be a speaker this evening.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. I'm sorry, Rick, I hadn't seen you up there.
That's okay, just a little confusion, and it happens. It happens.
Hey, thank you. I'm Rick Chemerson, 2301 Gold Leaf Court, Yuba City resident. I've been learning quite a little bit this evening, which is always good, because that's always what we fear, is the unknown and the parts that we're not familiar with. So I do want to speak on the proposed extension of UP 12-01, and for the sake of all, I want to note that I'm not paid, supported, or do I have a family or close personal friend with any waste management group in the area, contrary to some people's opinion. And I do not run or have any association with any of the 3 sites that are supported by people opposed to this extension. I am and have been an active advocate on items regarding city or county business and growth on many occasions when I feel there is a need, and tonight is one of those occasions. A specific meeting that you have some things taking place this evening that you don't normally see, people in attendance you wouldn't normally see. So it has gotten out there. It's something to be kind of concerned about. So in learning as much as I have this evening, I also want to bring to the table a little bit of a perhaps process that recycling industries in their endeavor to bring Republic Waste Management to our community, and therefore win a recycle waste management contract, had prepared by obtaining the UP 12-1 in 2014. All well and good. Looking to expand your business and planning ahead is very good. The only concern I have, and I'm sure I'm not sure, I absolutely am positive there had to have been notices made at that time. There wasn't any public comment made at that time because really the waste management industry is very complex. And I believe that very, very, very few people would understand the complexities, let alone the reason to go out and find what's taking place and what they should be saying. So there is a segment that hasn't been heard from, and as always with controversial issues, there are false statements and exaggerations made. There were people who signed the petition run through Facebook that probably believed that they were going against a very large dump site. I understand that. But there were many people such as I that did understand that what we were really looking at is 238 vehicles a day, which are made up a light car and truck, and a 10% limit on putrid waste. And it comes down to a basic belief, and mine is that I do not believe that this area of our community is the proper place to allow a transfer station. Regardless of best effort, trash is trash. Last Friday on my way to Loma Rica, I followed or passed 3 vehicles heading to the transfer station with trailers. Each of them lost paper, cardboard, and with one, a piece of plywood. I believe this will continue to be a problem when the public is going to the dump. I see no reason to invite blight to our inner city. I was appalled when informed that extensions are automatic. Apparently we're getting a voice, even though some people believe that perhaps the community doesn't need one. So I want to be sure that there is notice, that there is concern in the community. And perhaps there are changes, one of them being the fact, first and foremost, the citizens have become aware and they want to be heard. Some of the close to 1,000 signatures may have come from people not truly understanding the business expansion as described. However many, like myself, we did. Many people believe if you take it further than Facebook, truly to the community, there would be enough voices, you'd have to hear them. A significant change is necessary, and if the people are not enough, staff has recommended that it be approved without new traffic studies. This lot, right there, has been rocked over. It's acting as another truck transfer station or a very large trucking place right now. That's additional traffic to the area. This area right in here on one of them is now D Express, another trucking facility that has expanded in there. So recently, this took place sometime 2017, 2018. It's brand new, a lot more trucks. This one's taken place, they don't even have their signage or even an address up yet. They've got a little thing inside their office. How many other things have happened in the last 4.5 years that could make a difference today? That's why you're reviewing it. You're not just ramming it through. No matter how much work has been done, no matter how much preparation has been done, you're supposed to look back and see what's changed. And that's all I'm asking you to do. And I don't believe you have all the information to make that type of decision because it certainly hasn't been provided. I've had to point out that these things exist. So it's a sad state where the public has concerns and don't feel it's being perhaps listened to. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of wrong. I've gained a lot of clarity by being here this evening and really appreciate it. Is that my 5 minutes?
That was your 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I do thank you. I'm just asking you to consider the public. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your efforts. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak against the project? Hearing none, would you like to respond to the questions, Arnaldo, or shall I have the applicant come up? The first question that I noted was, what is the need for the use permit, and can it be used for the expansion? I think I'll combine those two questions.
There are a handful of questions that I'm going to have to defer to the applicant on.
Certainly.
In terms of clarifying a couple of items, the applicant today is operating under use permit 2007-12. So regardless of the commission's action this evening, the applicant would have the ability to continue to operate under that use permit. So the applicant is not operating under the 2012 permit at this time. And that's the application that's before the commission this evening. Now, if the applicant had indicated, I believe, and I definitely don't want to speak here, but I believe Mr. Shaw stated that he probably understood or that he had heard that the facility would have to cease operations or something along those lines. And again, I definitely don't want to put words in his mouth. Again, I would have to defer to the applicant for something like that. But in terms of his existing operations, again, he's operating under the use permit 2007. The application before the commission this evening is a 2012 application.
Okay, thank you. And I would invite you, Mr. Cunin, to come and respond to some of the questions.
Again, my name is is Dave Cunin. I don't know if I told you my address. I'm at 1169 Claro Court in Yuba City. I'm in the Keyway, so that's where I'm at. To clarify, I will say a couple things about our 07 permit and our 12-01 permit. We actually are acting partially under the 1201 permit because we're still subject to our inspections by the local enforcement agency in Yuba County. We actually possess a document. It's a transfer station permit, and as such, we're subject to inspections from the LEA. So it's a little bit of a, we're acting a little bit on it, but not full to the extent of having the building go up. So we do get the inspections. Contrary to Mr. Shaw's question, I was trying to follow everything. We're just here to ask for an extension on our existing permit. Our existing permit does permit commercial vehicles. There's no way we'd be able to ship material without a commercial vehicle. We've always had, and the 12- the transfer station permit allows for commercial vehicles, but not the Packer truck. It's a very specific truck. It's the truck that picks up the gray can at your house. It's the truck that front loads the food waste out of restaurants. We can't have those trucks. All right, but a roll-off truck, 1-800-GOT-JUNK, commercial type vehicle, a van, I mean, we can get those, and we do get them. So I'm trying to, I think that answers you, hopefully answers the question about the Commissioner Ali.
Well, it's clear to me that you are operating under the permit that was issued in 07.
Yeah.
And that what we are looking at tonight is a permit that was issued in 12.
Mm-hmm.
And that permit does not allow for what is in 17 and has not come before the commission to happen. 12 is 12 and 17 is a different permit and a change that would come before the commission.
Yeah, it's a modification of the 12 permit.
Okay, so the clarification that I'm looking for and that was raised is that approving 1201's extension does not approve the expansion without it coming to the commission.
I would agree with that. If you grant the extension, it does not grant the application that I currently have before the city.
And the further approval of 12, the 12 use permit that is before us this evening, allows you to continue on the process, which we do realize has taken quite a lot of effort to jump through all of the regulatory hoops and areas that the commission does not control or that are beyond our scope that you've jumped through during this time. So what we're looking at now is whether as a commission we are going to reapprove the 12 permit without concern for the expansion. That will be another complete issue that will come before this commission for review.
Yeah.
Is that correct? All right, with that, are there any of the other commissioners that have questions of Mr. Cunin at this time?
Just one question, if I could, Dave. One of the conditions that staff has added in the event you are successful in getting your extension is, and I think you've seen it,
yeah,
the one whereby you agree to defend, indemnify, etc. Do you have any problem with that?
I did it first. I understand that this is what needs to happen. I think it's unfortunate that I'm just a small business. Me and my father, we're just trying to do something real simple. And I'm prepared.
You're
really
prepared
believe,
to go along with it.
Absolutely. I think what we've done everything that the city's asked. The environmental review has already taken place. It's untouchable. I have met with both Mr. Shaw and Mr. Jimerson. So, I have met with them. I've spoken with each of them. I've listened to their concerns. I disagree with them. I've expressed my solutions to their concerns, and we just have a philosophical difference. And I don't understand, I still don't understand their position, even though I've heard it. It makes no sense to me. So, but here we are, and yes, it's a new, we're prepared to do that.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Commissioner Blake, did you have any further questions?
I do not.
Commissioner Otter?
I did. I had one. It sounds like, just for a point of clarification, one of the questions that came up from one of the gentlemen that were up there. It sounds like you are. It's a little bit of a blend with the use permits. You are using a little bit of the 12.
You have to
use
for our app. I'm just
So with that, I presume then that some of your business operations would be interrupted if this permit were not extended. Is that
absolutely?
Can you elaborate to what degree with that?
We're using this permit. It has all the benefits for the community, but it also helps sustain our business. We're trying to grow. It's very difficult to grow in this region in solid waste. There's a lot of there's people that don't want us to grow. And that's what's obviously out there in the public right now with a Facebook media campaign, and it just, I don't understand it really. Our small little transfer station is a small transfer station. That's all it is. And I live in the South area. I empathize with everybody's concerns about home values, and there's not going to be any home value loss. We've done all the research, and we've been a very responsible neighbor, taking care of that area. Mr. Jimerson's concerns of trash blowing around, we're supposed to, we police that whole region. But to say no, it would be a very difficult, it'd be very difficult for us to sustain our business without this 1201 existing permit.
Commissioner Shan, excuse me.
I had one other question that's more appropriate probably for Arnaldo, but just because I think we already asked this, but with respect to the traffic, Mr. Jimerson brought up some additional, I presume that some businesses have gone out of business, and therefore, I know you mentioned Yuba City Steel, but that we've added other businesses, but I just want to make sure that we're clear that has there been additional traffic added that is substantial or not?
So as part of this process, Mr. Jimerson had noted that there's a truck yard to the south and to the east of the subject site, which is right on the corner right here. You can't even catch a corner of it. That's an unpermitted truck stop that began operations, which we discovered as part of this process on some of our site visits. So that, again, it's unpermitted. So they do not have permits from the city to be there. And we were recently made aware of that. So we'll be contacting the property owner, and we will, and we start, quite frankly, we'll start enforcement action, and that begins by contacting the property owner. There probably are a couple of other businesses, but again, for the most part, they're light industrial and industrial in nature, which is codified, and those are the uses that can go in that area strictly by the application of the municipal code. There have been there's been two use permits proximate to here that were before the planning commission. One for a gym, and I think the basketball court were in the area, and those were came before the planning commission because they're use permits for recreational facilities within an industrial zone district. In the past, I'm going to say 16 months. So besides that, again, in terms of big picture, very minor uses in terms of changes.
And if I recall, wasn't most of that traffic off? It wasn't during peak, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Correct. It was non-peak. The basketball facility during the summertime, I think, was going to open at 12. However, their peaks, vehicle trips in terms of trip generation, were evening hours, and it would be during non-peak periods during the weekends, because that's when they would hold their basketball tournaments.
That's all the questions I have, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Shannon, did you have further questions of the applicant or staff? prefer to stick it with the applicant at this time, though.
Oh, I have some questions for staff, so go ahead. This is kind of, I need you to help me understand that in 2014, we issued a use permit. And at that time, there was a public hearing, people were noticed, people came in and commented, and we made the decision to grant the use permit. Is that pretty much correct about how it would have worked?
That's how it would have worked. The only thing that I cannot say with absolute confidence is if people spoke at that hearing. However, they were notified.
Okay, so it was taken care of. The extensions of the use permit are just simply, the holder of the permit needed time, and then the economy and so forth like that. They could have just as easily taken that use permit and taken care of business and built their 25,000 square foot building, and it would be there
Correct.
at any point in this period of time.
Correct.
Okay, so, that clarifies in my mind what I'm mushing on. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Schaefer.
No, I don't have any additional questions.
Okay. Then with that, I will close the public comment session. And are there any further questions of staff at this time? From the commission? Seeing none, then is there further discussion among the commissioners, or I'll call for a motion?
I have a comment. First of all, I appreciate Ricky coming down here and speaking. I take very seriously those that are willing to come down into this event and come and speak publicly about their position on issues. This commission takes it very seriously. I'm sorry if the notification process isn't done. That might be another issue to deal with, but certainly we take this very seriously, and I appreciate you coming down. We weigh that narrative into our final decision making as well. So I do greatly appreciate that, and we don't take that for granted. I just wanted you to know that.
I respect your time and your effort and everything that you do as a commission. I thank you very much for your participation for our community. We may not always agree, but we can always be friends.
Correct. Yes.
All right, any further comment? Commissioner Shannon?
If there's no further comments, I'm ready to make a motion.
Are there any further comments from the commission? So I would also like to comment that I appreciate the opportunity to have spoken with each of you and heard your viewpoints. And we're looking at the one item this evening, and we, in the past, as Commissioner Shannon mentioned, have worked very diligently on this process and take it very seriously to double up on what John has just stated. So we appreciate the time and effort that everybody has put into this. And at this time, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Shannon?
I move that we grant the extension of use permit 12-01 for 2 years with a new expiration date of July 23rd, 2020, subject to compliance with all the conditions and mitigation measures as approved by the Planning Commission on July 23rd, 2014, with the addition of the following condition. Applicant agrees to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the city, its officers, agents, employees from any and all claims, liability, or actions arising out of or connected with this project, except to the extent such liabilities are caused by the action of the city.
Madam Chair, I'd like to second that motion, and I am pleased to do that. I think this is the only just and right decision that this commission can make under the circumstances.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Commissioner Shannon and a second by Commissioner Sandbrook. And I'd like to call for a roll call vote.
Chairperson Ali,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Eiler,
Yes.
Commissioner Shannon,
Yes.
Commissioner Sandbrook,
Yes.
Commissioner Blake,
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
And Commissioner Silman is recused herself from this process. So the motion carries, it's unanimous. Congratulations on that, and thank you again for all of your input. And we look forward to the next process.
Oh, yes.
And the Commission's action is final unless an appeal is filed pursuant to Section 8-5.7104B of the Yuba City Municipal Code.
She's back there enjoying my time. She's fine.
Okay, wait a minute. I want to know why is there beach balls on the back of the stage right here?
Summer at City Hall. Darren forgot to bring the Mai Tais.
Is there helium in there?